welcome to North Texas Networkers, a show about connecting people across the DFW area. I'm your host, Caralee Gurney.
I'm your co-host, Stacy Revely.
And welcome. I'm really excited today because I have always wondered about someone who reads my brain. Can you read minds? And wouldn't you like to be able to read minds? So, yeah?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'd really like to read her mind because it's interesting. However, we're so glad to have our guest here today because she actually does read minds. In fact, she reads minds so well that she decided to turn it into a business. After spending 10 years with Frito-Lay and PepsiCo, she decided, and she'll tell us more about what she did there, but she decided to branch out on her own. And now 8 years, she has been studying neuroscience, the human behavior, and non-conscious behavior.
Is that different than unconscious behavior?
I think it is.
Okay, just checking.
So, welcome Michelle Adams with Marketing Brainology.
Well, thank you. Wow, what a great joy to be part of your show. And yes, non-conscious. We like non-conscious, even though it is the same as unconscious. Because unconscious, you just imagine somebody laying there who is not thinking. And non-conscious, your brain is thinking, you're just not always aware what it's thinking.
I figured as much. Well, we are so glad that you're here. Tell us a little bit about you, about your family, and just who is Michelle?
Well, so I'm local to the area, Planonian. So I've been there. I went to high school in Plano, and now my husband and I are raising 3 boys in Plano, Texas. We have been married coming up the end of this month, 33 years. And our two of our boys, one's at UT, one's at A&M.
Nice.
Which makes it a little house divided. And then we have one that's a 10th grader.
Awesome.
Well, tell us a little bit about Marketing Brainology. I mean, how did you come up with that concept? And tell us a little bit about what it is. What does it mean?
Yeah, so it does go back to, I've been in the business of studying human behavior since the beginning. We ask people questions like, tell me, what did you eat this morning? How much did you drink maybe this weekend? And so you learn really quickly in research that what people are actually wanting to tell you and what is the truth are sometimes different. And so I've kind of been on this path of trying to figure out how technology can help us. And so at PepsiCo actually was one of the first to utilize neuroscience tools at the extent that we did at Frito-Lay. And so I had the great experience of operating 4 neuro labs and seeing how to use the technology, and it has evolved. And the way it's evolved is originally we had these swim caps on people, 64 sensor, full medical grade equipment, but you can imagine how uncomfortable that would be. And so now we're using 16 sensor, 18 sensor EEG, and we're able to get the information we need. We're reading emotion, we're looking for triggers in the brain. So a lot of the stuff that we have questions about, now we can put some puzzle pieces together.
Well, you actually used to have a fake storefront?
Yes. Just down the road in Adolescent, Texas, something called the Smart Learning Center. It was very innovative at the time. It was one of the, for companies of PepsiCo's size, I think they were the first to open what was a virtual shopping grocery store. And sometimes it was a Walmart, sometimes it was a Kroger. It had a C-store in the back, so you could get your 7-Eleven Slurpee if you wanted. And the purpose of that is to study, again, shopping behavior, or ad testing. So if you're going to invest like Doritos does in Super Bowl ads, you better hope that it's connecting at the right levels. And so we always knew we'd measure things like, tell me which commercials do you remember from the Super Bowl? Well, there are so many. Mm-hmm. So how could you possibly remember all the ads? And the ones that did stand out was maybe something that was so funny or ridiculous and over the top, but what we're looking for is how are you emotionally connecting. And so now with social agendas for Super Bowl ads, you've got to make sure you're going to break through. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you've got to break through.
So interesting. So you focus on a lot of different groups. One of those is specifically women. So what made you want to look inside a woman's brain?
Well, it's not just women and men.
Okay.
So really, one of the side effects of having neuroscience tools available and as far back as we go, so I think we're like 12, 13 years in, is you notice immediately like the differences between the male brain and the female brain. And so just even hooking people up to the equipment like we will show you today with Rachel, who's here, the female brain is going to activate at a completely different level than the male brain. And it's not one's right, one's wrong. It's just differences that exist, and they exist because of hormones. And it's not such a structural difference. It's how we respond to the world. And so when we get called emotional, honestly, we are more emotional. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't men who are also emotional, but it is distinctly different. And so that really gets you down this path of then, what does this mean in business? What does this mean in the way we operate?
And that's kind of what, it'd be fun for you to explain, because when you explained it to me one time, I was just blown away by how it works. So you're working with X company. What do you go in and do for them? How does that look?
Yeah.
From that insight, from the backside.
Well, one of the things that we sometimes forget, because companies are structured, so if you're making it to the top and you're in the C-suite, it's going to be disproportionately male. That's changing, but you're making decisions based on the lens that you see the world. So when you make those big decisions, we're going to do this or we're going to launch this product, a lot of times 78% of decision making globally is happening with females, and they're either primary decision makers to buy or they are 50% or higher. So we really need to tap into what is she thinking and how is she experiencing something. So a lot of the time that I spend is actually explaining to sales forces the differences between the male brain and the female brain and how we network or how we receive information and how we connect emotionally to a brand, for example. So a lot of the time that we spend is making sure that they're on course with both. And there are ways to get the female buyer and not polarize the male. And that's tricky. It's tricky because you could poke fun at a male, and that's an easy win with women, but you'll lose the male buyer. So we've got to make sure that the content that we're delivering breaks through, number one, that I've got their attention, and is it going to connect in a way that's memorable? And will they then go on to think of the brand differently?
Very interesting. And is an adolescent brain a lot different than an adult brain? Interesting question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you say you have somebody in your house going through puberty and you might think that they have grown into this foreign object you can't understand, there's a reason.
I remember this.
Hormones can explode a brain. And so really when we get somebody 14, 15, sometimes the girls, as young as 12 and 13 come in to do a study, you can see an activation that's caused by hormones. And so it does make it tricky, especially with girls, to register the way that the methodology works to get their information to look, because it's activated the whole time. So we still want to get what they say about something. We still get their eye tracking, but basically their brain waves are like off the charts.
Wow.
That's really helpful for parents who also come in and they witness it, because dads can now look over at that hormonal brain and go, okay, there is something that explains this. Yeah.
So how about we look at Rachel and see how this works?
Yes. So we literally are looking at Rachel here. This is, Rachel's been interning for us. She came from the STEAM Academy in Plano, Texas, and came before her senior year. And so she is familiar with this technology. She's majoring in psychology, and we've decided to make her our brain model today. And a lot of people are hair models, but brain models is a thing.
She's got the hair model.
And typically, Rachel's brain, given her age, so she'll be a sophomore in college this semester, and her brain is really pretty chill. We call it a chill brain because you can see that the levels, the waves are very calmed down. Now, when we first put her on and hooked her up, we have bright lights in here and people are staring at her. So her brain was very activated. But Rachel right now, we see a little cognition. She's probably thinking about this experience right now as she's going through. We don't see a frontal lobe right now, but we're able to then, we're really interested in this alpha and beta activation. And at this time, we've got her hooked up, so she's really not seeing anything different. So if she was in a lab, it would be in a darker room by herself, nobody talking, nobody staring at her. And then we'd be showing her content. And what we're looking at is which piece of content actually activates her brain versus another piece of contact. And the piece that she doesn't have on today, although we should have brought the eye tracking glasses because that makes you extra cool. So we can see what she's looking at, how long she looks at something. But that's what we're doing here with the technology.
Very awesome.
That is so cool.
Okay, so you show us things. Is it marketing pieces that you're showing us to see which one we react positively to?
Or negatively, probably.
Or negatively, yeah. We're looking for triggers and reactions in the brain. So the number one response that we get is basically the brain goes to sleep.
Okay.
So most content, as you're giving somebody a content, they're really good at tuning out. Now, maybe somebody in your life has tuned you out before. Has that ever happened?
I wonder how that's happened.
Maybe a spouse. But people that are in your life, they're like kind of wallpaper is in the house, like you don't see it anymore. So people that you hear those same voices, those same messages, you do start tuning stuff out. And the same thing happens in marketing. You get that message, maybe it's on YouTube. Today, most of the kids get their ads via YouTube. So they are being forced with content on YouTube. And so to stand out on YouTube as an ad and to play past the required 3 seconds has to be really good. And so you have to break through with content that's both relevant, that's effective, goes back to the brand.
Okay.
So yeah, it's challenging.
Sounds like it, for sure. One of the things you talk about too is nature versus nurture. How does that affect how we respond to things that we see?
Yeah, so I think in the literature between the male brain and female brain, there's some people that say, well, our brains are the same. Well, physically, they're not the same. The physical size, like when we put a headset on a male, their brains are bigger. Capacity for cognition is the same. So we like to say we can do more with less in the female brain, but the brains are changing to environment. So nurture is a big piece, and it's the piece that's least studied, is how the brain changes over a lifetime. So I'll use myself as an example. I grew up with 3 brothers, no sisters. So in nurture, we're wired for survival. So if I were to get emotional a lot in a household with 3 boys, I'm probably going to be taken down. So literally, I know how to do a frog, if you've ever learned that.
I learned that from my 2 brothers. Yes.
So you literally learn techniques to get you through your environment. And nurture is a big piece of it. So now with 3 sons, I just don't really cry very much at all. Like maybe at a graduation, which we didn't even get to have those this year. So there is this female tendency that is nature, the way we're all born, and there are significant differences. But as we go through our lives, we adapt to our environment, and that goes to the plasticity of our brains. So that's the joy, is that we can change. So there's really no
how you're born, and nurture is how you're raised.
Yes, and so girls today, they grow up in team sports, they're learned to be competitive, to take people out, to, all those things that are part of the hierarchy of the male brain are more part of the female brain now because of changes in Title IX and the ability to compete as a young person at a very high level.
So are women's brains bigger than they used to be?
I haven't studied the change over time, but I think the one thing is what will change is the young people today, including my youngest son. His brain is able to process a lot of information at the same time. And we were taught, and I went through PepsiCo training on focus, do one thing. I think they're really going to change where they will be able to multitask differently than our generation.
Well, I think they are getting more input at a faster rate than what we did.
Right.
The technology.
I mean, when you have 2-year-olds who know to swipe
Yeah.
an iPad,
Yeah.
It's amazing.
the brain changes.
Wow.
So,
Well, you also like to focus on some specific things. 2 things I can think of off the bat is one, women helping other women, and then the other one is leading the next generation. So tell us how you're doing some of those things.
yeah, I think we as women have to stand on the shoulders. We're standing on the shoulders of other women who are ahead of us. And I've been part of women's leadership teams. And as a result, PepsiCo sent me through one called Power of Self with Marsha Clark leading that program. And it's 20 years into the program. I was year 9.
Wow.
And in that program, there are women of all generations. And so you start to learn that their lives were very different. And when we learn what they went through to get to where they are today, it's understanding, wow, we didn't have those same challenges. We now have another generation that hopefully will be standing on our shoulders. And they need to know our challenges and why we're the way we are. At the same time, we have to recognize that they didn't go through the same struggles. So that struggle to succeed in corporate America as a female is not their struggle. Like, that's going to happen for them. I've got some lawyers in the audience. Lawyers and medical schools have a disproportionate number of women now, but that wasn't the case. If you're an engineer, still though, my son's at UT in the electrical engineering program, there are very few women in that program still. And that's a choice. But I think it's important for all of us to mentor as much as possible, to share our experiences, the good and the bad, and then to bring them to a place of understanding. And I believe in that. And it was really fun to be part of the Women's Network at PepsiCo and be able to share some of the learnings of the male brain, female brain. I think even today, that's probably what I'm most famous for, those speeches on the female brain. So,
Is there anything you would share with us from those speeches that you think would be a highlight?
yeah. So interestingly, some very high-level executives of our customers, the clients that PepsiCo had. I did probably at least 100 speeches to clients of PepsiCo, and those are grocery executives and others, Walmart executives, is they don't really understand the spouse or the women living in their houses, and they don't understand the change of puberty, or so that insight around the female brain changing 3 times during a lifetime and understanding what that changes in the way they are relating to their environment or relating to their spouse is probably key. And given their ages, the one they wanted me to focus on the most is premenopause and menopause, because to me that's the least understood among women and men. So that the wife that they married, who is nurturing, going to make their meals, do their laundry, clean the house, all those great things, it's not, she has changed, and that empathy that made her want to do all those things is not necessarily what's most important to her as she is in her those years of 45 to 55 to 65. At that point, she's about making big changes to the world and how can I make a difference in the world, and your meal is probably a little less important. Sorry, guys. Of course, my husband's like, I never got a meal. What's going on?
Nothing has changed.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced over the years that you had to really stop and overcome to be successful?
Yeah, I think there's still this challenge of behavior. So my conflict is I am very masculine oriented. I'm competitive. I like to win. I like to be on top. But I also like to dress. I'm here in pink. I like makeup. I like to curl my hair. So it's unexpected to have certain behaviors. And I'm guessing the two of you have experienced that yourself, is this conflict of what they expect out of a physical presentation and then what your
enjoy.
motivations and how your wiring is. And so there is that conflict. And I think we had a coach who, there were 4 directors at the time who went through some coaching training, and I got lectured because I was too girly.
That's funny.
But I think that's where this next generation, they feel like they can wear whatever they want, they can dress however they want, and they won't be judged. And maybe they won't, but we were.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
just love it. So let's just go back and say you started all over again. Would you do the same thing, or is there something else you would do that if you could do anything in the world as your career?
Yeah. So I actually wanted to be in news. I actually wanted to be an anchor and wanted to be and to do a TV career. But that was really challenging. To make that happen, the odds were really small. There were not very many jobs. So I did take another path. But I also wanted to be a motivational speaker. And though I'm not the same kind of motivational speaker, I think understanding the brain and being able to communicate information that's valuable to people is my form of motivational speaking. So I've joined the National Speakers Association. I have some of my colleagues here today. Even Jeff Caralee is a part of our organization, and it's been a real blessing for me. I'm thankful Linda Swindley is the one that drugged me in a couple years ago, and so that is my dream, is to be able to communicate information that we have the blessing of collecting this information in our labs. We can talk about it publicly. We've just recently, we did a COVID study on how people are receiving information about wearing masks, about the crisis, about from CDC, what's the public health guidance. So we've moved into public health. We recently did social issues, and we're looking at unconscious bias. And I've been able to tap back into the University of Texas, Dallas, where I got my degrees. And I'm working with the faculty on some issues because this technology isn't available to everybody. It's very rare to have it. And during a COVID crisis, I could probably safely say very few labs were operating like ours was during a COVID crisis. So,
Very cool. So what's next for Marketing Brainology?
So we are moving, so I come out of public health. My PhD's in political economy, so it wasn't really marketing. It's the same. Getting you to change your health behaviors or to wear a mask or to do something that's going to help the general public is marketing, but they call it public health. So we're going through the certifications to get government. We're a female-owned company. We're going through the Small Business Administration to get our certifications. So we are looking to contribute back in a way, taking some of the joys and benefits of the private sector and see how we can give back in the public sector, especially during a health crisis.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so we've asked you a lot of questions today, but what have we not asked you that you wish we had?
Wow. What are you guys most curious about from the brain technology? Like, I'm kind of curious, how would you use this? Like,
You've always had me perplexed and like in this mysterious mode of, okay, what I'm trying to grasp what you do. And it's amazing to me that you can watch someone's reaction and know what's going on inside. So I guess the thing I'd be most curious about is how well did you read minds before you got into this? You
know what? So a fun little study. I was doing youth use of alcohol, youth use of tobacco. So for my friends from the Department of Health and Human Services for the federal government, I did that for 9 years out of graduate school. And before that, I was a high school teacher and cheer coach. So that was like what I did the first job ever.
Wow.
And you get really good when you're looking out in a classroom of people, of studying faces and see who's with you and who's not. And so when I now can have eye tracking where I could tell you how many fixations, Rachel does this all the time. She's able to tell us how many fixate on this word or on this image or on this or that. We can measure that now. So I think the fact that we all actually use our intuition a lot more than we give ourselves credit. And we're able to then look at somebody to study their eyes. You guys are in the business, a service industry. So you're
being able to read people.
You are having to read people. So it's just now take it with some cool tools.
I didn't know I had a psychology degree.
Or that we needed one, maybe. I think it would be interesting to see how people react when they walk into various houses, what attracts them, what turns them off.
Scent.
We think we know.
Scent.
We think.
We are constantly exploring sensory elements. And so when you guys do the things that you do to stage a house, it actually makes so much sense because what you're wanting the person to do, you're wanting them to be able to visualize what that house will look like with their kids. So taking down all the personal things that brand that house. Like, by the way, at our house, oh, good luck with that. It's all over, so much stuff. You would have to de-stuff us. But there's a reason for that because just like a brand, you want them to visualize what that brand will give them and what it will do for them and how it will make their family feel. And so you guys are in that business already. You're having to adjust what you wear maybe depending on who the client is. And those are all things that brands do, is try to understand who their core buyers are, what makes them tick, and then how do you connect.
Well, I wanted to give your audience a little time to ask some questions. Does anybody have some questions that you might want to ask?
I want you to tell me about diamonds and supporting each other and maybe founded that.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for that.
Do you mind repeating it again?
Yes. So one of the things when you leave a corporate job and you've been there for 10 years like I had, you leave your friendship group. And what I hadn't realized is I was vacationing with my friends from PepsiCo, and you're on Facebook with your friends. And so a core essence of who you are is the company. So one of the only things that I really missed was my friends. And luckily we were connected on Facebook, but immediately I found the challenge of my friends had a different life, like working tons of hours. I was now able to travel the world and give speeches and do these things. I craved a network. And so basically went to lunch with a friend of mine, Allison Northern, who goes to the same church. I knew her, and she had brought another friend, and in the Women Supporting Women, we just had such a great time. We were at Urban Crest in downtown Plano, and it lasted 2 hours, and that lunch went on. We said, this is great, like how do we formalize this? And we did. We came up with a logo. It's called Diamonds in the Rough. We built a structure, we built a Facebook page, and everybody in the group so the three of us got to, Susan Tidwell was the other founding member, got to invite 4 or 5 of their friends. Well, essentially what we did, and Linda joined the group, and now Rowena's in the group. The essence of it is as we're shaking up, so we're not all marketers from PepsiCo, and Linda's a public speaker and Rowena's a realtor. I mean, you want to switch up your network because when you're so homogeneous, you don't learn new ways of thinking. A lot of them were in the group are in software sales. I thought I was competitive. No way. They are so much more competitive than me. They can get more done in a day than I can. So it's powerful to integrate groups and shake things up. So thank you, Linda, for being part of our group. We were on a call last night, as a matter of fact, and we've tried to do that throughout the whole crisis, COVID crisis, is to either have Zoom group calls. So we have a structured Monday night call. Last night it was supposed to be a team call, but we went old school. We just made it like a call.
Just caught up. Just caught up. Other questions? Yes.
Is it working?
Yeah.
So summarize the differences between the research that you do versus the existing old school research of focus groups or implicit research, those kinds of things. How does this fit into that grouping?
Yeah. So the question is how does the type of research that we're doing at Marketing Brainology compare to more in our industry focus groups? You've heard of focus groups.
Focus groups is probably what everybody's most familiar with. Right?
Famous for the M&Ms and the sweet snacks that you get behind the mirror as a client. So when you're watching a focus group, it's super fun to be behind the glass. The issue with focus groups is if the facilitator is phenomenal, she can or he can control the group. But usually this might happen to you guys where you're at dinner with friends and one person dominates. There usually is one person that kind of controls the conversation or moves the conversation in a direction. So at that point, you're going to not say what you maybe were going to say. So it's this response to others, and in group environments that happens. Now, it's not to say that you would never do a group, because we do small groups, friendship groups, ourselves, discovery groups, but the technology is used independent of others. So I, as an interviewer, or if Rachel's interviewing somebody or somebody on the team is interviewing, you're going to react to the way we look, the way we dress, what we might think, and you're going to filter. With the technology, you don't filter. So we do both. We still use the eye tracking, we use the EEG, and we still listen to what people say, because in the intersection of those three is the story.
Anybody else?
How do you see the kids that are in college coming through that are interested in that sort of direction, future for their career? How do you see that developing in the years to come?
So exciting. It's so exciting for them because the technology is available. I mean, if we can hook somebody up right now, and we're reading Rachel's brain the whole time, but she's not sleeping yet. She has not fallen asleep, so she doesn't know when I'm going to use. And just me saying her name, right,
changes it.
It has
a
changed.
reaction, because now all eyeballs are on Rachel. So the fact that we could do this. So the field of psychology, which I think your daughter Amy wants to go into psychology, and Amy was an intern this summer at Marketing Brainology. She is going to be able to then, you have somebody on the couch, right? The stereotypical psychology, I'm going to ask you questions, but I can now also see triggers. And triggers are important because you're unconsciously, there's a trigger of insecurity that exists in all of us. And we know it, we hide it, we don't often talk about it. The great thing about a great friendship group is that we can reveal our insecurities. So for me, a deep-rooted insecurity growing up, because I was a cheerleader and my mom and I had a cheer dance studio in Plano, is being dingy, like being labeled as a dingbat, like which cheerleaders sometimes and dancers sometimes get. That's a trigger for me, because that's why in my back pocket I have a PhD in case ever needed. But I think understanding those triggers in the field of psychology, or if somebody has something that is making their brain overpowered, which ADHD, ADD, Asperger's is not using this technology, but should be, when we want to diagnose something. It's pretty clear when somebody has something. Now, we're not medical, we're not diagnosing, but it should be used in psychology. It should be used. You have now neuropsychology. So I think, to me, that's the opportunity for the kids today. They're going to have this.
Very good.
All All right. Well, thank you, audience, for participating. We love having an audience. You're our second audience, so we're very excited. And Michelle, we're just so glad to have you here. You've been a blessing to us today, and we've learned a lot of fun things. And I just want to continue to learn from you because you just do such amazing things. You have videos that you do almost daily on LinkedIn, right?
We do put a lot of content out there, yeah.
So where are some places people can find you?
So probably where most of our content resides is marketingbrainology.com.
Okay.
But I'm a networker, so feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. That's the number one way I feel like I can support other people is on LinkedIn. And then we do have a Facebook page and Twitter page. So Marketing Braino is our Twitter page. We do produce content related to the brain or psychology or something like that. So we have that coming out on a daily basis. We try to post 4 to 5 things a day.
Perfect. And you and I were talking yesterday, and I believe you said something about how important you think the social media is. So
Yes.
do you want to share a little bit about?
Yeah. I mean, social media can be overwhelming, but it can provide a lot of good content. So I think as a responsible brand or company, providing just like you guys are doing with this podcast, it's not about real estate, but you're providing a service to those that can listen to the podcast. And the same thing, I think we as company owners can provide content that is meaningful and helps explain. So we'll be doing more about the male brain and female brain. We have an article coming out in a magazine in September that we'll share publicly. We were just on Wired.com and talking about our COVID study. So I think sharing is something that we can give back, and social media is the best way for us.
That's great. Very nice.
Well, thank you again,
Thanks
all
for
of you
being
for being here today. Thank you, Michelle Adams, CEO of Marketing Brainology. Thank you so much. MarketingBrainology.com.
Yes.
Don't forget to look her up.
Thank
and,
you.
we'll look forward to seeing you next month on the 3rd Tuesday of the month. Thank you for joining us. I'm Caralee Gurney, and we also want to thank Craig Schrank, our Willow Bend Mortgage sponsor. And
I'm Stacy Revely.
and we are your real estate professionals.
Thank you for joining us on North Texas Networkers. Visit our website, mariposagroupdfw.com. That's MARIPOSA Group DFW.com for more information about the show and other resources. I'm Caralee.
And I'm Stacy.
And we are your real estate professionals.